Boring history for sleep, why you wouldn't last a day in the Roman Empire, and more. Hey guys. Tonight we journey back to ancient Rome, but not the polished, marble-columned postcard version. No, you're waking up inside a cramped, creaky insula or tenement building somewhere in the Subura district. Think of it like a 5-story apartment block made of timber, brick, and hope. Above you, someone's shouting about moldy olives. Below you, someone else is already hammering something into a wall at full volume. And beside you, a guy named Lucius who apparently snores through his mouth and nose. You stretch, already sticky from the Mediterranean heat. There's no running water in here, of course. If you want to splash your face or, heaven forbid, relieve yourself, you'll need to head downstairs and out into the alley, which currently smells like a mixture of fish guts, goat urine, and regret. It's not even dawn, and you've already stubbed your toe on a pottery shard. Now, let's be honest. You probably won't survive this. Even just the commute to wherever it is you're supposed to be today could do you in. Streets in Rome aren't streets the way you think of them. They're narrow trenches of stone, often clogged with carts, beggars, stray dogs, and human waste tossed from upper windows with a cheery cave canem. Which should mean beware the dog, but here it just means duck fast or wear it. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know where you're tuning in from, city and local time. It's fun to see how far this sleepy little empire stretches. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're barefoot on the stone floor because sandals are expensive and yours were stolen last week at the bathhouse. Your tunic is stiff with yesterday's sweat, and your neighbors have already used the communal latrine downstairs, which now features a mysterious buzzing sound and several unidentifiable fluids. Outside, dawn slips in like a lazy cat, soft and golden. But don't get romantic. Rome at dawn is a war zone of smells. The butcher shop's already open, and someone's dragging a headless pig down the road. Smoke rises from charcoal braziers, and the scent of stale bread mingles with the lingering aroma of burnt hair. You dodge a puddle that you really hope is water, duck past a woman screaming at a fruit vendor, and trip over a boy selling fake amulets to tourists. It's barely 6 a.m. You pass a shrine at the street corner. Laras and Penates, the household gods, are decorated with flowers and maybe a little wine offering. You pause and give a half-hearted nod. You'll need all the divine help you can get, especially because the baker's line is already down the block. You might score a loaf of panis for breakfast, but only if you bribe the right official or flirt with the flower inspector. And heaven forbid you get caught on the wrong side of the Ager, the raised roadway where the carts barrel through like angry bulls. You flatten yourself against a wall as one rumbles past, its wheels spitting gravel. The driver yells something about your mother and a centurion, but you're too tired to be insulted properly. Historians still argue whether the street layout of Rome was a feat of organic genius or just centuries of architectural improv. Either way, it makes getting around a nightmare, especially since most signs are either missing, misleading, or in Latin so cursive it looks like someone spilled wine across the stone. There's some relief when you spot a popina, a kind of Roman snack bar. But it's crowded with hungover laborers and you end up squashed between a bricklayer with a death cough and a woman with more gold teeth than you thought possible in this century. You order a cup of Pascha sour wine diluted with water and herbs. It's better than it sounds, but that's not saying much. As you sip, you overhear a debate about whether the emperor was poisoned last week or just ate bad oysters. One guy swears he saw the imperial food taster burst into flames. You nod politely and slip away. Rome runs on gossip like it runs on sewage, openly, constantly, and without filters. You try to head toward your workplace if you can call it that. Most jobs in Rome don't come with benefits unless you count not dying as a benefit. Maybe you're a messenger darting between temples with scrolls and wax tablets. Or a mosaic tile apprentice, scraping your fingernails raw for 2 denarii a week. Or maybe you're just looking busy enough to avoid being conscripted into cleaning the vomitorium later. You pass the forum, bustling, chaotic, and somehow always under construction. There's a protest happening near the rostra, Rome's giant speakers platform. Some guy in a tunic 2 sizes too small is yelling about land reforms and waving a chicken. No one seems to care, but the chicken's making a solid case. And then there's the fashion. You're surrounded by people in togas, yes, but not the elegant ones from marble statues. These are wrinkled, mustard-stained, and worn with the kind of despair only government clerks can manage. You notice someone trying to tie their toga properly for the third time, muttering curses under their breath. It's a known thing, toga anxiety was real. Historians still debate whether the ridiculously complex folds were a status flex or just punishment by fabric. A nearby temple bell tolls. Time's ticking and you're late. But before you can move, someone drops a live chicken at your feet, part of an impromptu augury session. A priest kneels down, inspects the direction it ran, and declares that today will be favorable for minor legal disputes. Cool. Not helpful for your hangover, but good to know. You finally make it to your destination just in time to see it locked because your boss is also late. Classic. As you lean against a pillar and wipe the sweat from your neck, a street poet begins shouting verses about Jupiter's hemorrhoids. Everyone laughs, including you. Maybe not because it's funny, but because it's either laugh or cry and tears cost hydration you can't spare. And that's just the morning. You haven't even had breakfast yet. But don't worry, that's next. So, you're hungry. Starving, actually. After surviving the shouting vendors, dodging cartwheels, and politely ignoring the goat sacrifice parade that blocked the entire Via Appia, your stomach is staging a full-blown rebellion. Unfortunately for you, the Roman definition of breakfast is generous. They call it ientaculum, which sounds like a spell from a less successful wizarding franchise, but really it's just code for you'll be chewing disappointment. You wander into another popina hoping for something hearty. The barkeep offers you a stale piece of bread, soaked in watered-down wine, and a smear of garum, a fermented fish sauce that smells like someone left a tuna sandwich in a Roman helmet for 3 weeks. The locals call it a delicacy. You call it a warning sign. You plop down on a worn bench and start crunching through your rustic toast, trying not to imagine what part of the fish produced this particular tang. It's not bad exactly. It's just bold. Extremely bold. Like someone turned regret into a condiment. A woman next to you offers you a tooth-cleaning stick. You accept it gratefully, until you realize it's a rough twig dipped in crushed bone powder, oyster shell fragments, and ashes. Roman dental hygiene was less about minty freshness and more about scraping your molars like barnacles off a boat. Still, it's this or let garum linger on your breath until Saturnalia. Historians still argue whether Romans genuinely cared about dental health or just liked bleeding gums for aesthetic reasons. Either way, you give it a half-hearted scrub and immediately feel like you've licked a sandbox. Outside, the sun climbs. You spot a baker's stall selling small, flat loaves of panis quadratus, bread with a crust you could chip a fresco with. These were often baked in communal ovens, stamped with a mark to identify the owner. Lose your loaf, and it's finders keepers. That's assuming the neighborhood dogs don't get there first. You manage to buy one and consider it your biggest win since avoiding that man who tried to sell you a genuine feather from Pegasus. He's still out there somewhere, probably targeting fresh tourists from Britannia. Next to the bread cart, a fruit vendor offers slightly wrinkled figs and some grapes that look like they've seen better decades. You try one. The surprisingly sweet, or possibly fermented. Either way, it takes the edge off the salty fish paste horror still haunting your tongue. There's a kid running around with a tray of fried dormice on sticks. Yes, dormice, the adorable kind. But these have been skewered, rolled in poppy seeds, and deep-fried in something that might once have been olive oil. It's crunchy, savory, and just chewy enough to make you pretend it's chicken. A man next to you picks his teeth with a hairpin and grunts in approval. You try to match his level of enthusiasm. Crunchy. He nods like you've passed a test. That's when a man in a tattered toga wanders by muttering a blessing and offering eggs, raw. They're part of some morning ritual, he insists, meant to honor Ceres, goddess of agriculture. You politely decline and suddenly feel like you've dodged another culinary ambush. Breakfast in Rome, it turns out, isn't about variety. It's about survival. You make do with your bread, your possibly tipsy grapes, and a gulp of pasca to wash it down. You try not to gag on the sediment. A pair of schoolboys rush by, snickering. One drops a wax tablet. You hand it back. It's covered in doodles of gladiators fighting what looks suspiciously like an angry duck. You smile. Kids these days. You decide to take a stroll before heading to whatever thankless job awaits you. Along the way, you pass a cluster of elite Romans enjoying ientaculum on their villa patio. Their meal is slightly fancier. Honey cakes, dates, and a watered-down Falernian wine served by a servant who looks like he hasn't blinked since dawn. One senator gestures with a grape and complains about the heat, while wearing 10 pounds of embroidered linen. You keep walking. You pass a graffiti-covered wall near a bathhouse. Most of it is crude poetry and questionable stick figures, but one line catches your eye. I came, I saw, I left early. Too crowded. Mood. Rome is full of walls like this, citizen expression via stylus and impulse. Historians still debate whether graffiti was tolerated or just impossible to stop. Either way, it gives you a little moment of solidarity across centuries. Someone else also hated mornings here. As you round the corner back toward the Forum, a woman stops you and offers what she claims is a health tonic. Vinegar, crushed rosemary, and why not, a dash of goat bile. You pretend to be late and hustle past before she can elaborate. Her teeth are very green. Your stomach's still grumbling, but at least now you're full enough to function. You wipe your hands on your tunic and wince. Someone else's fish sauce from earlier. Excellent. Nothing like the lingering perfume of ancient anchovy extract to set the tone for your day. You start to notice how everyone else is reacting to breakfast. A man near the temple steps is retching into an alley. An old woman is fanning herself violently after a sip of spoiled milk. And one child has clearly had too many honey cakes and is now vibrating near a statue of Minerva. Still, there's something sort of charming about the chaos. Everyone's doing their best with what they've got. And in ancient Rome, what you've got is mostly moldy bread, goat cheese, and condiments that could double as paint stripper. As you pass back into the heart of the city, someone offers you a pastry stuffed with dates and nuts. It's warm, soft, somehow actually good. You bite into it, and for one blissful moment, all the sour wine and gritty tooth powder fade into the background. Then a pigeon lands on your shoulder and immediately regrets it, if you catch my drift. You sigh. It's time to get to work. Let's be clear, Roman jobs aren't dream careers unless your dream includes calloused hands, unpredictable hours, and a non-zero chance of catching something mysterious and incurable from a shared tool. Employment in the empire is less about fulfillment and more about not starving to death. And your job? Well, you're still not quite sure what it is. Some mornings you're a messenger. Others you're hauling stones for a contractor who pays you in salted lentils and life advice. Occasionally you find yourself guiding confused tourists from Gaul who think the Colosseum is a temple to Mars. Today, you're filling in for a friend who allegedly has a cold but more likely just didn't want to shovel animal dung from the chariot racetrack again. You shuffle through the streets toward your designated labor zone, clutching a wooden shovel that's older than the concept of weekends. The sun's climbing now, turning the marble buildings into giant reflective ovens. Sweat trickles down your back. Your tunic is sticking to places you didn't know could sweat. You pass a public notice board plastered with job announcements, most written in scribbled Latin that could either be "help wanted" or "cursed is he who removes this posting." Historians still argue whether these boards were effective means of employment or mostly just a free-for-all for passive-aggressive notes. Your workplace today is a bustling construction site near the Aqua Claudia aqueduct extension. It's a massive project, and you, lucky soul, are helping haul bricks up a shaky wooden ramp. You're paired with a man who has 3 teeth and a mysterious tattoo that may or may not say, "Property of Legion 13. He grunts and hands you a hod, a kind of brick backpack strapped across your shoulders. It's heavy enough to realign your spine, but you smile and nod because complaining gets you nothing but a stern fortitudo, and maybe a swift slap with a measuring rod. The foreman, who may have been born angry, barks out instructions in a dialect that somehow combines Latin, grumbling, and bird calls. You follow the other's lead and stack bricks in neat rows while avoiding the guy with the wandering pickaxe. It's around this point that you learn about Roman labor safety protocols, which is to say, there are none. Scaffolding is made of fraying rope, helmets are a myth, and the only thing keeping you from falling 3 stories is the assumption that someone will catch you. They won't. You pause for a breather near a barrel of water, only to realize it's actually full of lime mortar. You quickly pretend you meant to check it and move on. A senior worker offers you a flask of wine-spiked vinegar and advises you to keep your back straight and your soul resigned. You laugh. He doesn't. Nearby, a group of scribes are sitting on shaded benches, recording the day's progress. They have feather pens and smug faces. One of them sneezes and asks if anyone has imported honey water to soothe his throat. You consider launching a brick in his direction, but remember you need this gig. Also, he's probably connected to someone important, judging by the fact that his sandals are clean. You return to the ramp and keep loading bricks. Overhead, a mosaic tile artist grumbles that the sun keeps melting his paste mixture. You pass him a shade cloth, and he thanks you by muttering something that might be a blessing or a curse. It's hard to tell with artists. Lunchtime arrives and the work halts. Everyone collapses into dusty corners or shaded alcoves. You sit near a wall where someone's carved an image of two gladiators battling a lion and losing. The message? Even heroes lose, so maybe just try to stay employed. Your meal is modest. A chunk of bread, a few olives, and a piece of smoked cheese that smells like regret and feet. Someone hands you a figure. You accept it like a medal of honor. It's soft and sweet, and for a brief second, you forget that you're covered in grime and your lower back is plotting mutiny. A few of the workers start playing a dice game with knucklebones, gambling for oil rations and half-eaten lunches. One man bets a pair of socks. The winner looks like he's just inherited an empire. You consider joining, but your luck is historically bad. Last time you gambled, you ended up owing someone a goat. As the break ends, you overhear two men debating the benefits of switching trades. One wants to be a scribe. The other dreams of becoming a gladiator. At least there's applause when you suffer, he says. Fair point. Historians still debate how mobile Roman careers really were. Some sources suggest social climbing was possible if you were clever, lucky, and preferably related to someone rich. But for most people, jobs were more like traps than ladders. You were born into one role and spent your life trying to survive it. Afternoon work resumes hotter and more miserable than before. Someone spills a load of bricks down the ramp. The foreman shouts, curses Jupiter, and demands a sacrifice, hopefully just metaphorical. You grab a broom and sweep the rubble, pretending your shoulder isn't on fire. You notice the senator's villa across the road has fresh mosaic work depicting a nymph feeding grapes to a lazy satyr. Meanwhile, you're scrubbing donkey prints off the floor. Classic. Eventually, the work winds down. You're released with a pat on the back that knocks the wind out of you. Your tunic is crusted in dust, your hands are blistered, and your legs feel like two wet scrolls. But you did it. You survived another Roman workday. Barely. You limp away from the site, squinting as the sun begins to dip low over the rooftops. There's a strange sort of satisfaction in knowing you earned your bread today, literally and figuratively. Even if all you want now is a bath, a bed, and maybe a few hours of sleep without dreaming of collapsing scaffolding. But don't worry. There's plenty more to do before you get any of that. You're covered in grime. Your arms ache. Your stomach is trying to stage a coup again. And your hair now holds enough dust to qualify as its own archaeological layer. So naturally, you head toward the one place that promises relief, the Roman bathhouse. From the outside, it doesn't look like much. Just another squat stone building tucked between a butcher's stall and a temple to Fortuna. But as you push open the heavy wooden doors, a wave of heat and human chatter rolls over you, thick with steam and the faintly unsettling scent of lavender oil mixed with yesterday's sweat. Bathing in Rome isn't just about hygiene. It's practically a civic duty, a social scene, and a status check all rolled into one. You pay your entrance fee to the capsarius, the attendant who handles both towels and side-eye. He raises an eyebrow at your state but says nothing. You're clearly not from the upper tier of society, but also not quite in the should-be-hosed-down in the alley class. You begin in the apoditerium, the changing room. It's bustling with men stripping off tunics, arguing politics, and trying not to step on someone else's sandals. You find a cubby, tuck your few belongings inside, well, securely if you consider a shelf watched by a half-dozing slave to be secure, and wrap yourself in a short towel that's slightly damp and smells like goat. A pair of merchants are loudly debating grain prices while a younger man lounges nearby, oiling his biceps and pretending not to listen. You pretend not to stare at the slave polishing a bronze mirror with what looks like your exact level of enthusiasm. Next stop, tepidarium, the warm room. The air here is heavy and soft, scented with herbs someone must have tossed into a brazier just to flex. You sit on a warm marble bench. Your muscles start to loosen for the first time since sunrise. A man next to you tells you about his third cousin who saw a ghost in the forum baths. You nod slowly and try to look impressed. Everyone has a bathhouse ghost story. They're Rome's version of campfire tales except told while half-naked and dripping. You move on to the caldarium, the hot room. And hot is an understatement. This place could bake bread. You step inside and immediately feel your lungs protest. The walls drip with condensation. The floor is slick. Someone's humming what might be a hymn to Apollo or just a tune to distract himself from melting. A slave offers you oil. Not soap, mind you, oil. You smear it on, trying not to slip. Then comes the strigil, a curved metal scraper used to slough off the oil and grime. A man nearby is getting a vigorous scrape that sounds like someone buttering toast with a shovel. You take your turn and nearly yelp. It's not painful exactly, but it's about as relaxing as being exfoliated by an angry dolphin. Historians still argue whether the oil method actually cleaned people or just redistributed the filth. You choose not to think too hard about it as the attendant wipes your back like he's polishing a shield. After that, you're directed to the plunge pool frigidarium, the cold bath. It's freezing. You lower yourself in slowly like someone testing lava. Your brain short-circuits. You emit a noise that isn't quite a scream, but definitely isn't dignified. Across from you, a retired soldier chuckles. "Good for the joints," he says, thumping his knee. Cracks audibly. You believe him out of fear. A couple of senators pass by, whispering about an upcoming trial. Another group of young nobles are debating whether Venus or Bacchus throws a better party. One guy just wants someone to admire his new sandals. Socializing here is half the point. You overhear gossip, veiled threats, romantic drama, and someone trying to sell a slightly haunted amulet. The bathhouse, you realize, is where business gets done and reputations are made or unmade, especially if you faint in the cold pool. Finally, you stagger out and back to the apoditerium where your belongings are thankfully still present. You dry off with the least damp corner of your towel and pull your tunic back on, now wrinkled and smelling faintly of roasted thyme and anxiety. A man next to you is applying perfume from a tiny glass vial. He offers you a dab. You accept. Now you smell like you're trying to impress Jupiter himself. You nod your thanks and he gives you the sort of look that suggests he'd love to talk politics but hasn't decided if you're literate. You exit the bathhouse feeling approximately 83% better. You're cleaner, slightly more hydrated, and carrying fewer fleas than you were an hour ago. Progress. Outside, the sun is lower now, casting the forum in gold. The city's rhythm changes in the late afternoon. Merchants begin to pack up, street performers get bolder, and the smell of cooking fires wafts from homes and taverns. You hear someone shout your name from across the plaza. It's a friend, if friend means person who owes you money and sometimes remembers your birthday. He's headed to a public lecture at a nearby portico and invites you along. You decline politely. One more speech about stoicism and you'll scream into a column. Instead, you wander slowly, feeling human again. You pass a group of women buying wool-dyed purple, expensive elite. You catch a glimpse of a priest blessing a statue with incense. You hear a burst of laughter from a nearby taberna where early dinner is being served. You think back to the bathhouse ghosts. There's something oddly timeless about them. Rome may be mighty, messy, and occasionally full of questionable hygiene choices, but it's also human, tangible, imperfect in a way that feels deeply familiar. And it's not over yet. Evening's setting in. The city softens. Shadows stretch long between the columns, and the white marble of Rome turns a dreamy shade of honey in the fading sun. You've bathed, barely eaten, and survived a shift that could be classified as light torture in most modern job descriptions. But your day isn't over yet. Now you need dinner. Let's get one thing straight. Roman cuisine is not exactly the romanticized banquet of grapes and roast peacocks you've seen in paintings. Sure, if you're rich, like drop a denarius and don't pick it up rich, you'll have an elaborate spread with rare spices, imported fish, and maybe even a flamingo tongue or two. But you're about to experience the culinary equivalent of survival with seasoning. You duck into a small popina, one of Rome's many street-side taverns. It's cramped, smoky, and loud, but it smells amazing. The scent of grilled onions, garum, that pungent fermented fish sauce Romans seem to worship, and sizzling meat makes your stomach whimper in anticipation. There are no tables, just a stone counter with holes set into it like a fast food buffet for the ancient world. One hole has chickpeas stewing in olive oil. Another bubbles with some kind of fish and leek situation. You go for the safest option, lentils with bits of sausage and a hunk of bread so dense it might stop an arrow. You eat standing up, elbow to elbow with a retired centurion and a woman selling dyed wool. Conversation buzzes around you, politics, gossip, complaints about taxes. Taxes are everyone's favorite thing to complain about. Historians still argue whether tax evasion was a national sport or just a survival instinct. A kid runs past shouting about a chariot race result. Someone else raises a clay cup and toasts to Mercury for getting the payment in just before sunset. You raise your own cup in silent agreement and sip watered-down wine that tastes like it lost an argument with a vinegar barrel. The food fills you up, not luxuriously but sufficiently. The sausage is chewy, the bread requires focus, and the lentils taste like they've been seasoned with equal parts salt and resignation. Still, it's warm, and it quiets the ache in your stomach. Once you're done, you step outside into the cooling air. Rome by twilight is a whole different creature. The heat finally breaks, and people spill out into the streets to walk, talk, shop, or just exist without the weight of the sun crushing their spirit. Oil lamps flicker on street corners. Candles appear in windows. Someone's playing a flute badly, but enthusiastically. You wander toward the Subura district, a crowded, lower-class neighborhood that's equal parts vibrant and terrifying. It's where real life happens, bakers, butchers, metalworkers, and every form of humanity packed into a tight, smoky maze. And it's where your tiny insula apartment sits. Insulae are Rome's version of apartment buildings, usually made of wood, usually several stories high, and usually about as structurally sound as a house of breadsticks. Yours is on the 3rd floor. The stairs are narrow, worn down, and suspiciously creaky. You pass a neighbor arguing with her son in Latin that's devolved into creative invective. Another is pouring chamber pot contents into the alley below, and act as dangerous as it is disgusting. Inside your one-room space, things are modest. There's a straw mattress, a clay oil lamp, a shelf for your 2 tunics, and a small wooden box containing everything you own that isn't currently being worn, eaten, or owed to someone. One wall has a crude painting of Mercury, likely for luck. He looks as tired as you feel. You light the oil lamp. The flame sputters and steadies, casting long shadows on the cracked plaster. You sit on the mattress, removing your sandals with a groan. Your feet are not so much feet anymore as meat-flavored bricks. You examine a fresh blister and whisper something unrepeatable in ancient Latin. From outside, the noise continues. Someone's telling a long joke in Greek to a crowd gathered by a tavern. A dog barks. A baby wails. A pair of drunks argue about whether Nero had a good singing voice. One of them attempts to imitate it. Spoiler, he did not. Still, there's something oddly comforting about it all. This chaotic, grimy, stumbling Rome. The city has a pulse. You can feel it even in the dust and the noise. It's alive, and you're part of it, even if it mostly wants to crush you like a grape under a senator's heel. You lay back, staring up at the wooden ceiling beams above, which look like they might be plotting to fall during the next thunderstorm. You think about the wealthy elite in their spacious villas, probably dining on spiced dormice and fig cakes. And for a second, you wonder, would you trade your life for theirs? Probably not. Their politics are more dangerous than wild boars. At least when you're scrubbing aqueducts, you know who your enemies are. Bricks, gravity, and your own bad posture. Before you drift off to sleep, you hear a commotion in the alley. Shouting, followed by the clatter of what might be an amphora smashing. You peek through your narrow window to see a merchant chasing a boy who's bolted with a pouch of coins. The boy vanishes into the dark like a ghost. You lie back down, heart slowing. The night air is cooler now, and you finally start to relax. A scratching sound near your foot interrupts that peace. Oh no. You light the lamp again and spot it. A rat the size of a wine jug staring at you like it's sizing up real estate. You throw a sandal. It flees into the shadows. You sigh and tie a rope around your food stash for the night. Nothing's sacred, not even your leftover lentils. You blow out the lamp and settle in, hoping for sleep and no structural collapses. Rome doesn't sleep, not really. But you have to, because tomorrow, you do it all over again. And rumor has it the latrines on your worksite backed up. Again, you wake up to shouting. Not the angry, drunken kind you've grown used to hearing echo through Sabura's narrow alleys at all hours. But the sharp, urgent kind that means someone's either dying, on fire, or behind on rent. You blink against the light slicing through your wooden shutters and realize it's none of those things. It's just your neighbor yelling at her laundry. A new day in Rome. Time to rise, stretch, and contemplate your options, which are, in essence, toil, survive, and avoid being fined for something you didn't do. You grab a crust of yesterday's bread, sip some tepid water, and throw on your less wrinkled tunic. Then it's out into the streets again where life waits with all the subtlety of a mule kick. But today isn't a workday. Today, by the blessings of whichever minor household deity you've accidentally impressed, is market day. Rome's markets aren't just places to buy things, they're where the city breathes. You make your way toward the Forum Boreum, the cattle market, which also hosts everything from fresh figs to slightly cursed trinkets. A group of men in spotless togas, actual togas, not the more casual tunic you're wearing, are eyeing a particularly gaudy necklace at a jeweler's stall. One of them is loudly claiming it once belonged to Cleopatra's hairdresser. Historians still argue whether Cleopatra even had a personal hairdresser or if that's just Roman marketing flair. You walk past them, careful not to brush against their crisp white wool. Toga wearers tend to be sensitive about pleat maintenance. You pass a potter with stacks of amphorae painted in crude mythological scenes, one of which appears to depict Hercules giving up halfway through a task and sitting down for a snack. You respect that energy. Someone else is selling scrolls of poetry, mostly knockoff Virgil, while another has cages full of songbirds chirping furiously. A customer nearby asks how long they live. Depends who you marry, the seller replies with a grin. Just beyond, a toothless old woman beckons from a shadowed stall covered in little bottles. Perfumes? Poisons? Both? Hard to tell. You give her a polite nod and keep moving. She mutters something about strong ankles which you choose not to interpret. Then you hear it, laughter and rhythm. A crowd's gathering around a small troupe of street performers juggling daggers and doing comic impressions of senators. One's mimicking the emperor's latest speech with exaggerated flourishes and a fake laurel crown. You chuckle, dangerous but hilarious. Rome has no shortage of entertainers. From mimes, yes, real mimes, no white face paint, just intense eye contact, to flute players to trained monkeys doing military drills. The city's like a non-stop talent show where the prize is not being arrested. Suddenly, a commotion. A large, sweaty man bursts from a side alley shouting, "Thief! Thief!" You freeze. A boy darts past you, pouch in hand, and disappears into the crowd. The man follows, cursing every deity from Jupiter to the household spirit of his goat. Moments later, a city guard ambles by, pretending to care. Theft is so common here, it's practically its own job market. You check your own pouch. Still there. For now. You stop by a stall selling used sandals. One pair looks just like the ones you lost at the bathhouse last month. You pick it up. Yep, that's your stitch pattern. You lock eyes with the seller. He shrugs and offers you a discount. Back toward the meat sellers, you pass a man slicing roast pork off a spit. He offers you a sample, which is more gristle than meat, but you eat it with gratitude. Best in Rome, he shouts. You nod, chewing mechanically. It's not, but you're not about to argue with a man holding a carving knife and 4 large sons. Eventually, you turn down a quieter side street, the kind where odd things tend to happen. A man is standing on a crate delivering an impassioned speech about stoicism, while a couple of bored-looking teenagers draw rude shapes in the dust nearby. He locks eyes with you mid-sentence. And so we must accept fate, even when it smells like rotten fish and disappointment. You nod solemnly and keep walking. You'll take your philosophy in smaller, less shouty doses. Nearby, an elderly woman is reading fortunes from sheep bones. She grabs your hand and peers at your palm before whispering, "You will travel far, unless your floor collapses first." Comforting. At a stall near the edge of the market, you find something truly strange. A selection of old, mismatched items from estates. Oil lamps, coins, statues with broken noses. One tiny bust looks suspiciously like Emperor Tiberius with a mustache scratched on. You consider buying it. A little heresy can be fun in small, clay doses. Back in the main square, a parade is forming. Not an official one, more like an impromptu mess of musicians, dancers, and people just happy to follow noise. You join the crowd for a few minutes, clapping along as a man plays the tibia, an ancient double-piped flute, so enthusiastically his cheeks may explode. You even dance a little, or what passes for dance after a meal of lentils and vinegar wine. Your feet protest, but your spirit lifts. Rome might be a daily struggle, but sometimes it surprises you. The sun starts to dip. You pick up some fruit, 3 bruised apples and a slightly overripe pear from a vendor packing up for the day. He throws in a fig with a wink. For your strong ankles, he jokes. You realize he's the old woman's son. Of course he is. You wind your way back toward home, arms full, stomach slightly less empty, and mind full of the day's smells, sounds, and stranger-than-fiction moments. As you pass the Temple of Saturn, the evening sun strikes the columns just right, and for a fleeting second you feel it, the weight and wonder of this city. All its contradictions, grandeur and grime, divinity and dung, ambition and absolute chaos. You step around a puddle that definitely isn't water, dodge a stray cat eyeing your pear, and climb the rickety stairs back to your insula. Rome may never sleep, but tonight maybe you will. You wake before sunrise, not because you're ambitious or well-rested, but because someone 2 floors down is attempting to butcher a pig. Loudly, with apparent vengeance. The squealing and crashing might be part of a breakfast preparation or a blood feud. Hard to say. You roll over on your straw-stuffed mattress, groaning. Every muscle in your back feels like it's been beaten with a marble column. But there's no snooze button in ancient Rome. Just the relentless rhythm of survival. You rub the sleep from your eyes, light the oil lamp, and grope around for your tunic, which is still damp from yesterday's sweat and this morning's stew. Lovely. You slosh your face with a bit of cold water from the clay jug. If anything, it's more of a slap than a refresh. Then it's sandals on, pouch tied, and out the door. Because today is Temple Day. Not a religious festival, you're not lucky enough to land a day off for that. No, today, like many days in Rome, involves offerings. Specifically, you're making one to ensure that the city's many gods don't make your already precarious life worse. A bit of divine insurance. Because if there's one thing Rome loves more than conquest and garum, it's appeasing an exhausting number of deities. The air outside is cool, crisp, and thick with the promise of incense. The city hasn't quite woken up, just a few vendors setting up, a donkey braying, and the odd night owl finally stumbling home with half a sandal. You make your way toward the Forum Romanum, Rome's beating civic heart and spiritual shopping mall. Temples to Saturn, Vesta, Castor, and Pollux line the space like divine storefronts. You weave through marble columns and chipped statues, heading toward the temple of Jupiter Optimus Maximus. Big Jupiter, boss god, CEO of thunderbolts. As you approach the steps, you pull from your pouch a modest offering. Some pine nuts wrapped in a bit of cloth and a pinch of incense. You're not made of denarii. The gods will just have to accept the budget plan. You climb the temple steps, the stone cool beneath your sandals, and pause at the top. The altar ahead is blackened from countless burnt offerings. A priest is already there, muttering a prayer in that long-winded, melodic chant priests seem to love. You're not entirely sure what he's saying, but it includes the phrase, "May the pestilence pass us by," which seems universally useful. You wait your turn, bow your head, toss your offering onto the altar bowl, and whisper your own plea. No roof collapses, no food theft, and please, just once, a workday without some kind of plumbing disaster. The incense curls upward, carried into the morning sky. You watch it for a moment, hypnotized by how it dances between light and shadow. Then you turn, brush your hands off, and head back down the steps. That's the thing about Roman religion. It's not about feeling spiritual or enlightened. It's about maintenance. Like checking your gutters or making sure your landlord doesn't curse your walls. Keep the gods happy, or at least not irritated. You don't want to give them a reason to notice you. As you move through the forum, you spot a statue of a goddess with her nose chipped off. Probably Minerva. You nod at her out of habit. She's the goddess of wisdom and craft, 2 things your boss clearly lacks. You continue your stroll, passing the Vestal Virgin's house. These women have one job, keep the sacred fire of Rome burning. Which sounds poetic, but mostly involves being constantly watched and sworn to eternal chastity. Historians still argue whether being a Vestal was a high honor or a very elegant prison sentence. One of the younger Vestals passes by in a cream-white robe. Her expression is unreadable, dignity tinged with just the slightest touch of "I'd kill for a slice of cake." You don't linger. There are rumors that staring too long at a Vestal brings bad luck. Or worse, jury duty. You head toward a smaller shrine tucked away behind a row of columns. It's dedicated to Mercury, the messenger god, patron of travelers, merchants, and, conveniently, thieves. You pause and offer him a silent nod just in case. Mercury's the kind of god who appreciates pragmatism. Around the corner, you stumble into a procession. Not a grand one, just a local parade for some minor harvest deity. A group of farmers in dusty tunics chant rhythmically, followed by a man in an elaborate headdress carrying a live chicken. The chicken looks terrified. You do too when it flaps violently and nearly escapes into a nearby bakery. You follow at a distance, half curious, half looking for a shortcut home. The procession winds through a narrow alley where people have hung laurel branches and fresh garlic from their doors, a protection spell or just a comment on the local cooking. One older man sees you and shouts, "Join us." Bless the wheat. You wave politely and keep moving. Your relationship with wheat lately has been complicated. By mid-morning, you're back in Subura. The sun is climbing and the quiet is gone. The streets pulse with movement. Children shout. Vendors hawk. A man pushes a cart piled with pottery and curses at every stone that bumps a cup loose. You stop by a small roadside shrine on your block, one of the Lara's Compitales, where locals leave offerings to the neighborhood's guardian spirits. It's simple, a rough stone base, a small alcove with faded paintings, and 2 wilted garlands from last week's festival. You add a couple of raisins and murmur a quick prayer for your apartment's ceiling. Then you spot it, an actual miracle. A baker is giving away slightly stale rolls. You grab one and devour it with the enthusiasm of a man who knows he'll probably only get one meal before sunset. The baker watches you chew with the air of someone who understands survival better than most. "Bread's from Fortuna's festival," he says, brushing flour off his hands. She owes you nothing, but she might smile today. You thank him, mouthful, and keep walking. You make your way back home, your feet already aching, your stomach slightly soothed. As you unlock your door and step into your one-room sanctuary, you realize something. In Rome, survival isn't just about work or food. It's about knowing which gods to please, which priests to avoid, and which chicken not to stand too close to. You collapse onto your mattress, arms behind your head, and stare at the ceiling. Maybe the gods did smile today. Still, you tie up your leftover bread in a cloth and hang it from the rafters. You trust Mercury. But only to a point. There's a knock at your door. Not the kind that means trouble, no one's shouting taxes or judicial summons. But a polite, rhythmic tapping. That's already suspicious. Nothing polite happens this early in Rome. You crack open the door and find your upstairs neighbor, Lucius, standing there with a sheepish grin and a tunic that smells aggressively of lavender oil. "Morning," he says. "You still alive? Good. Come on, it's bath day." You sigh. Bath day. Equal parts social event, hygiene ritual, and minor ordeal. You forgot it was Dies Balnearius, the public baths discount day. Which means crowds. Which means noise. Which means nudity. So much of it. Still, it's not really optional. In Rome, going to the baths is part of being a functioning member of society. Skip it too often and people talk. Smell weird and people really talk. You throw on a freshish tunic, grab your strigil, a curved metal scraper used to remove oil and dirt from your body, a charming Roman substitute for soap, and a small flask of olive oil. You leave your sandals on because, frankly, you've seen what grows on bathhouse floors. You and Lucius head toward the nearest thermi, in this case, the baths of Titus, a solid mid-range option. Not as fancy as Caracalla's sprawling palace of steam and nudity, but not a rickety hole in the wall either. Along the way, Lucius is annoyingly chipper. "Heard there's a new master," he says. "Looks like Mars. Hands like a smithy." You nod vaguely, hoping you won't be asked to make small talk while being scrubbed like a turnip. Approaching the entrance, you already hear the familiar chorus of bathhouse sounds, splashing water, echoing conversation, the occasional grumble of a man who sat on a hot bench too soon. You pay your fee to a bored-looking attendant, 1 quadrans, and strip in the changing room, where benches are scattered between piles of tunics and a suspiciously unattended pile of coin pouches. You clutch yours tightly. Not today, Mercury. Your first stop, the apodyterium, the changing area, really just a glorified locker room. Then into the tepidarium, the warm room. It smells of oil, mildew, and ambition. The air is thick and heavy, the warmth wrapping around you like a damp cloak. You take a seat on a smooth stone bench and begin rubbing yourself down with oil. Across the room, a politician is arguing loudly about aqueduct funding while being scrubbed by a slave. You try not to make eye contact. Then into the caldarium, the hot room. This is the heart of the bathhouse, steam rising from the heated pool, stone walls slick with condensation, voices lowered to whispers and hisses. You lower yourself in carefully. The water's just the side of boiling. Your pores scream, then sigh. Around you, half-naked Romans engage in various states of relaxation, debate, and extreme loitering. A group of men are playing dice in one corner, shouting at each other about a clearly cheating move involving a weighted tessera. In another, a scholar is explaining the works of Cicero to a man who looks like he once tried to eat Cicero. You stay quiet, hoping to go unnoticed. A balneator, one of the bath slaves, approaches with a knowing look. He motions to the scrubbing bench. Here it comes. You lie down. Warm stone beneath you, steam above. The balneator rubs more oil into your skin, then begins the ancient art of Roman exfoliation, scraping you from neck to heel with a metal strigil like he's polishing a helmet. It's equal parts soothing and humiliating. You make a half-hearted joke about losing a layer of dignity along with your dead skin. He doesn't laugh. You're not sure if it's because of the joke or the fact that he's done this 1,000 times to far less chatty people. After the scraping, there's the cold plunge. The frigidarium is the final trial, a stone pool filled with water that feels like betrayal. You try to act casual as you step in, but your body reacts like it's being sacrificed to Neptune. You sink in up to your chest, teeth clenched, limbs locked, and pretend you're enjoying yourself. Nearby, a teenager shrieks and immediately clambers out. You feel vindicated. As you dry off in the laconicum, the dry sauna, you and Lucius sit in companionable silence. The heat, the scrape, the plunge, it all has a strange effect. For the first time in days, your muscles stop threatening mutiny. You close your eyes. You could fall asleep right here if not for the echoing slaps of towel duels somewhere behind you. The bathhouse, for all its quirks and occasional horrors, is the great equalizer. Senators and slaves, bakers and butchers, rich and poor, everyone sweats the same. You listen to the chatter, someone reciting epic poetry, another retelling last night's tavern brawl, a third insisting he saw a ghost in the caldarium. Historians still argue whether bathhouses served more as hygiene centers or informal forums for gossip and politics. Based on what you're hearing, it's a solid tie. Eventually, you towel off, gather your things, and slip back into your, still damp, tunic. You step into the sunlight blinking like a mole, body freshly scraped and vaguely glowing. Lucius pats his stomach, content. Feels like I lost 5 years of grime, he says. Not that it'll matter after 2 hours in the market. You part ways and start the long walk home. Your skin feels oddly vulnerable without its usual armor of dust. Your feet slap the stone road a bit more confidently. For a brief, shining moment, you're clean. You smell faintly of lavender, oil, and regret. As you round a corner, a cart splashes a suspicious puddle across your sandals. Well, that lasted 15 minutes. Still, you head home lighter, smoother, and with a mental note to never again skip bath day. Because in this city, dirt may be eternal, but at least once a week, you get to pretend you're made of marble. You know it's going to be a weird day when the first thing you hear is a rooster crowing indoors. Somewhere above you, a neighbor is probably trying to fatten it for Saturnalia or train it to fight in some back alley poultry ring. You can't decide which is worse. Stretching your aching limbs, you shuffle toward the window and peer outside. The streets are already bustling. Vendors shouting about fresh olives, dogs chasing carts, someone loudly arguing about whose mule stepped in whose urine. Ah, Rome. You dress quickly, because today's no lazy bath day. Today is about something far more dangerous. Paperwork. Specifically, a trip to the census office. And don't let the name fool you. This isn't just some dusty archive where men quietly count things. In ancient Rome, the census is a ritual of power, identity, and suspicion. You're expected to present yourself to officials, state your occupation, family status, assets, debts, and hopes for reincarnation. Except they won't record that last part unless you bribe someone. You join the flow of citizens headed toward the tabularium, Rome's grand record office tucked into the slope of the Capitoline Hill. It's a grim but imposing building, all arches and bureaucracy. You're here to update your registration. Not because you want to, but because last week, your name appeared in the wrong column. The one reserved for itinerant laborers and questionable house guests. Which, frankly, feels rude. You wait in a long, slow-moving line of tunic-clad men, many of whom look equally annoyed and deeply confused by the forms they're holding. Most of these forms are written on thin wax tablets, scraped clean and reused so many times they feel like the chalkboard of a very tired god. A scribe sits behind a wooden counter, scratching notes with a stylus and giving each citizen the same blank stare that says, "If you mess this up, it's not my fault." Finally, your turn. The scribe doesn't look up. Name, you tell him. Occupation, you hesitate. Mixed laborer, he raises an eyebrow. Meaning, occasionally move things, fix things, carry things. Sometimes people. Once a goose. He makes a face like he's trying not to care, then scratches something into his tablet. Property, you shrug. A tunic, one sandal in good condition. A roof that mostly holds. He doesn't laugh. No one ever does at the census office. He moves on. Dependents. None that claim me. Criminal record? You shake your head. Just mild theft. Of dignity. There's a long pause as he scratches the final lines, then presses a seal into the wax. You'll be reassigned to your proper column. If you see your name on the temple wall again, it's not my problem. You nod and take the sealed tablet like it's a diploma from the University of Mild Inconveniences. Leaving the building, you're hit with that strange post-bureaucracy euphoria, the kind of joy you only feel after surviving government functionaries without crying. You reward yourself with a honey cake from a street vendor who assures you, falsely, that it's still fresh. You wander, half-eating, half-thinking. Rome's streets wind like a lazy river through a jungle of walls, temples, statues, and occasionally, open sewers. Around the Forum, you pause to watch a group of toga-clad elites loudly debating tax reform while slaves pour wine into their silver cups. You roll your eyes and move on. You've got your own business to handle, because you're not just navigating Roman paperwork today. You're also due for your clientis visit. You see, ancient Roman society runs on patronage. If you're not rich, you attach yourself to someone who is patronus. Your job is to show up, flatter them, maybe run errands, and in return, they might help you find work or keep your name out of a debtor's list. It's basically networking with more groveling and less coffee. You arrive at the domus of your current patron, Gaius Rufus something or other, a middling noble with a fondness for imported figs and theatrical size. You and a handful of other clients wait in the atrium while a servant announces your arrival. Gaius eventually appears in his senatorial whites, arms raised like he's being applauded at the Colosseum. "Ah, my friends," he says with the enthusiasm of a man who just remembered he left the garum open. "You honor me. You offer your respects, mumble something about his wisdom, and present him with the customary morning gift, a small token usually symbolic. You chose a pine cone. You're not proud." He accepts it without blinking, then gives each of you the sportula, a small basket of food and coins, the traditional payoff for your loyalty and public praise. Today's contains bread, olives, and a suspiciously bruised pear. But it's better than nothing. He drones on for a while about a debate in the Senate, the moral decline of the youth, and how the Sabines have lost their sense of drama. You nod politely. Somewhere during his monologue, a bird flies into the atrium, poops on a mosaic of Neptune, and flies out again. You consider this the highlight of the visit. Eventually, Gaius dismisses you with a wave, and you slip out, clutching your sportula like it's a paycheck, which, in a way, it is. Historians still argue whether the Roman client-patron system was a dignified social contract or just institutionalized groveling with snacks. You're leaning heavily toward the latter. You meander back toward your apartment through the midday crush. The sun hangs high, casting hard-edged shadows. Someone plays a reed flute nearby. Someone else shouts about missing goats. You pass by a public notice wall, fresh announcements in red ink. There's a gladiator match tomorrow. A lost dog with a limp and righteous anger. Poem written entirely in bad Latin puns. You add your name to a posting for part-time work loading Amphrey. Just in case. By the time you climb the stairs to your apartment, your feet are sore, your mouth is dry, and your pear is starting to ferment. You flop onto your mat and look out the window. The sky is gold-tinted now. The city hums. And you, a citizen in good standing at least until the next column update, have made it through another day of Roman bureaucracy, favors, and fragile hierarchies. You chew your questionable pear slowly and sigh. You may not have a villa, a toga, or a fresco of Neptune that hasn't been soiled by pigeons. But for now you've got your name in the right place. And in Rome, that counts for something. There's something particularly rude about being woken by a trumpet. Not a musical performance, mind you, just a single, shrill blare echoing down the alleyways like a goat screaming into a pot. You groan and roll over on your straw mat. But the trumpet insists. Somewhere outside, soldiers are marching, boots slapping the stone rhythmically, weapons clanking with all the grace of kitchen cutlery in a bag. You peek out the shutters to see a small unit of legionaries parading past. Their centurion is yelling something about formation discipline while pointing at a barefoot recruit with a face like boiled cabbage. Great! It's a military inspection day. And you live just close enough to the Castra Praetoria, the elite guard barracks, to catch all the noise, but far enough that no one ever gives you free wine after drills. You stretch, wince, and wonder for the 100th time how anyone volunteers for Roman military life. You've seen the training exercises, men dragging logs uphill, practicing shield walls in full armor, shouting until their lungs give out. Looks like a fine way to develop shin splints and anger issues. Still, in a city like this, military life is one of the few paths to stability. If you can survive the training, the marches, the barbarian skirmishes, the surprise inspections, and the occasional mutiny, you shuffle out into the street caught in the wash of daily foot traffic. Your plan today? Just observe. Learn what life is really like for the men who guard, expand, and occasionally overthrow Rome. You start by tailing a group of legionaries heading to the Campus Martius, Rome's military field turned exercise ground. There, young recruits are already being drilled under the brutal midday sun. One unlucky fellow is vomiting quietly behind a bush while his superior shouts, "Better here than in Britannia." You find a shady spot near a pillar and watch. The drills are harsh, repetitive, and absurdly thorough: shield drills, javelin practice, sword strikes against wooden posts called pili. The recruits grunt, sweat, and occasionally curse when they think no one's listening. You spot a veteran among the trainers, grizzled, one eye slightly off target, face like sun-dried parchment. He's shouting something about the correct way to skewer a Gaul with all the passion of a wedding toast. And here's the thing, Roman military training is no joke. These men are taught to march 20th miles a day in full gear, build forts on command, and dig trenches like angry beavers. They carry packs so heavy they're nicknamed Marius mules after the general who thought soldiers should also be pack animals. One recruit drops his gladius mid-swing and is immediately told to do double marches. Another gets smacked with a vine staff called a vitus, a centurion's favorite disciplinary tool. You make a mental note, never drop anything in front of a centurion unless it's a bribe or a fainting spell. Historians still argue whether Roman military efficiency was due to superior discipline or sheer stubbornness. Watching this, you're convinced it's both, with a dash of masochism for seasoning. You follow the troop as they finish training and head toward a field camp for rations. Soldiers don't eat like emperors, but they're not starving either. A standard meal, flatbread, porridge, lentils, maybe some salted pork if they're lucky. And always wine watered down because hydration matters, but you can't just drink water. That would be barbaric. You try to join the line for rations, but one look from a soldier and you back away slowly. Just observing, you mutter. Instead, you drift toward the castra, the permanent barracks that house the legions when they're not on campaign. Outside, a group of soldiers is gambling with knucklebones and arguing over who cheated last time. One throws a chicken bone in frustration. It hits a bystander who doesn't even blink. Rome, baby. Inside the castra, or what little you can glimpse without being arrested. You spot neat rows of bunks, well-organized storage, and armor laid out like an art exhibit. Everything here screams order. Even the shoes are aligned, probably under threat of latrine duty. A young soldier steps out, wiping sweat from his forehead. You ask him what life's like inside. He shrugs. Wake up, drill, eat, clean, drill, sleep, repeat. Oh, and maybe fight a Germanic tribe once in a while. He says it like you'd say, pop down to the bakery. You nod, wondering how many years it takes before that tone of voice kicks in. The conversation drifts to superstition. Soldiers are a superstitious bunch, some carry charms, others etch protective symbols into their shields. One swears he won't step onto a battlefield without his lucky rabbit's foot and a whispered curse in Oscan. Later, you witness a small ceremony where soldiers offer a bit of bread and wine at a shrine to Mars, god of war. It's brief, solemn, and deeply Roman, equal parts practicality and reverence. You watch as a new recruit hesitates, then drops his offering with trembling fingers. Behind him, the veteran claps him on the back and mutters, "That's the easy part. Wait until someone yells charge." You retreat from the barracks with a deepened appreciation for these iron-willed, frequently foot-blistered men. Not admiration exactly, just a sense that if you had to live in a world of regular stabbings, you'd rather it be them than you. You finish your day near the edge of the field of Mars, watching as the sun starts its slow slide toward the horizon. A group of soldiers is training in mock formations, practicing the famous testudo, the tortoise formation where shields lock overhead and to the sides. It looks ridiculous and brilliant at the same time, like an angry armadillo rolling across the battlefield. You try to imagine yourself in the line, shield up, spear out, sandals digging into dirt, breath fogging in the cold morning air of some northern province. You picture the discipline, the danger, the long marches with your gear cutting into your shoulder. And then you picture yourself dropping the shield, tripping over your own caligy, and being yelled at by a man holding a vine staff. Yeah, you wouldn't last a day. But at least you'd go out with excellent posture. As the trumpets signal the end of drill, you turn and walk home. Feet sore, eyes opened, stomach rumbling. Rome's soldiers may be the backbone of the empire, but you're more than content being its hangnail. You're awoken by the scent of burning herbs and the distant, rhythmic chanting of priests. Not your usual rooster-based alarm clock, but somehow even more unsettling. For a moment, you wonder if the gods have decided to throw a party and whether you were accidentally invited. You shuffle to the window and peer out. Across the rooftops, plumes of incense smoke curl upward like lazy snakes. The city has a strange hush to it. Market stalls are only half open. People walk a little slower, heads bowed slightly. Today, Rome is not just being Rome. Today, it's holy. You've stumbled into a dies religiosus, a religious day so sacred that normal life basically hits pause. No lawsuits, no weddings, no business transactions. It's as if Rome is collectively holding its breath so the gods won't sneeze on it. And you're in the middle of it. A mere mortal trying not to offend one of the 12 major deities or the dozens of lesser ones who could probably curse your sandals if they felt slighted. You wrap your tunic a little tighter and decide to join the crowd headed toward the Forum Boreum, Rome's oldest market and a hub for certain ceremonies. Today's ritual is dedicated to Hercules Invictus, the unconquered hero, and involves oxen, chanting, and a lot of stern-looking men in pointy hats. As you pass a shrine, a woman tosses a pinch of grain onto the fire and whispers a prayer. You do the same, hoping no one notices your hesitance. You're not exactly a religious scholar, but you figure tossing grain is better than accidentally summoning a minor underworld deity. The pontifices, Rome's religious officials, have already arrived. Clad in snowy white robes, they move with the slow precision of men very aware they're being watched by both the crowd and the heavens. One of them holds a sacred staff. Another carries a bronze pot filled with holy water. The third one, clearly new, looks like he might sneeze into the incense cloud and ruin everything. Historians still argue whether Roman religion was more about genuine piety or elaborate civic theater. Watching this slow, smoke-filled ritual, you're certain the answer is yes. Nearby, a flamen, one of the high priests, steps forward and begins the formal prefatio, invoking the gods in a sing-song Latin that you can barely follow. The oxen, who presumably haven't read the script, begin to moo at inopportune moments. Then comes the sacrifice. It's not as gruesome as you feared. The animal is led forward, crowned with flowers and ribbons, and blessed. A quick strike, a murmured chant, and the deed is done. The carcass will be divided, some parts offered to the gods, others cooked and shared in a communal feast. You're a little put off, but the aroma of roasting meat has a funny way of silencing moral quandaries. You drift through the crowd, listening to snippets of gossip. Someone claims the augurs saw a two-headed raven yesterday. Someone else says the omens are bad for next month's elections. A child asks if the gods can eat bread. His mother whispers, only the good kind. It becomes clear that in Rome, religion isn't just about temples and sacrifices. It's embedded in everything. You can't sneeze without someone saying, "May Jupiter guard you." You can't plant crops without consulting an omen. And you definitely can't go on a journey without checking if Mercury is having a good day. Even your apartment has a lararium, a tiny shrine with statuettes of household gods, smeared with oil and wine now and then. Your neighbor, who once poured beer instead of wine during a home ceremony, claims he hasn't slept well since. You make your way to the Temple of Vesta, one of the city's most sacred spots. It's a quiet place guarded by the Vestal Virgins, Rome's most revered priestesses. Chosen as children, sworn to 30 years of chastity, and entrusted with keeping the sacred flame alive, no pressure. As you watch them glide through the courtyard in their flowing white robes, you wonder what it must be like to live a life so wrapped in ritual. One wrong move, like letting the flame die out, and they risk being buried alive in a sealed chamber. You shiver. You've forgotten to pay your rent before, but at least no one tried to entomb you for it. A hush falls over the area as a litter arrives, carried by servants and surrounded by guards. Out steps the Pontifex Maximus, Rome's chief religious authority. He's an older man with tired eyes and very clean hands. Everyone bows slightly. You do too, if only to avoid being trampled. He says a few words, blesses a group of petitioners, and then retreats. It's all so polished and choreographed, like a divine pageant. You realize that religion here isn't about private belief. It's about public demonstration. The gods need to see you looking reverent, and your neighbors need to see it too. You duck into a small temple dedicated to Fortuna, goddess of luck. There's a wheel symbol on the wall and offerings scattered at the base. A few coins, some dried fruit, a very out-of-place wooden spoon. You drop in a tiny pebble, unsure if it counts. At this point, you're just hedging your spiritual bets. Outside, festivities have shifted into a more relaxed mode. Children run between booths where vendors sell amulets, sacred oils, and dubious curses removed services. A man offers to interpret dreams for a sesterce. You're tempted, but the last time you tried, the interpreter told you your future involved a goose, a fishmonger, and eternal confusion. You pass by a public speaker passionately denouncing an upcoming feast for being too Greek. No one's really listening, but he keeps going anyway. Rome is tolerant of many things, but being boring in public isn't one of them. As the sun tilts westward, the temples glow golden. You sit on the temple steps and watch a group of performers reenact the myth of Romulus and Remus. The actors playing the wolves are clearly just men in furry cloaks growling enthusiastically, but the crowd eats it up. Eventually, you make your way home. The incense still lingers in the air, and the chanting has faded to low murmurs. You pass more shrines, more offerings, more moments where people stop, cross themselves, and whisper a plea to the divine. Rome may be brutal, chaotic, and filled with questionable public hygiene, but it's also deeply, endlessly sacred. Every corner holds a symbol, every doorway a spirit. And while you're no priest or vestal, you understand this much. In this city, even your breath belongs to the gods. You wake up in the middle of the night to the distinct sound of someone loudly reciting poetry. Not softly like a lullaby, not respectfully, like in a theater, but forcefully, like a drunk goat trying to impress the moon. Welcome to Roman nightlife. You rub your eyes, stumble to the window, and spot your neighbor's cousin again. The one who insists he's the next Virgil. Standing in the alley by torchlight, declaiming a tragic ode to the unfair cruelty of figs. No one's listening, unless you count the feral cat judging him from the roof. It's Rome after dark, and it's a very different beast. You throw on a cloak, light a lamp, and step outside. The streets feel narrower somehow, the shadows longer. The marble buildings still glow faintly from the day's heat, but everything else is muted, hushed, until it isn't. A laugh rings out from a nearby tavern. Someone trips over a cart and swears loudly in Oscan. A fruit vendor is still selling dubious grapes to a toga-clad man who almost certainly forgot he bought grapes 10 minutes ago. The night belongs to the Subura now, the densely packed lower-class district where laundry hangs between buildings, wine flows freely, and personal space is more theory than practice. You pass a dimly lit taberna where locals gather to drink, sing, argue about chariot teams, and lose at dice. One man is asleep face down on a game board. Another is reciting scandalous love poetry to a half-empty cup. You slip inside. The smell hits you first, wine, roasted chestnuts, old wood, and the faint suggestion of someone's goat has been here recently. A man waves you over. Fancy a game? He slurs, gesturing to a table covered in tali, four-sided knucklebones used for gambling. You decline politely. You're not about to lose your last coin to a man whose eyebrow twitches every time he rolls a double six. Instead, you watch. The rules are simple, but the insults? Oh, they're poetic. One player is accused of cheating like a Carthaginian fishwife. Another threatens to invoke Bacchus himself for better luck. Historians still argue whether these late-night gambling dens were more about bonding or bankruptcy. Judging by the groans from the man who just lost his sandal in a bet, you're leaning toward the latter. You move on, slipping through an alley where an impromptu lyre concert is happening. 3 musicians, one barely in tune, pluck out something resembling a ballad about lost love and fermented olives. A couple dances nearby, spinning clumsily under the flickering torchlight. You find yourself smiling. For all its strict laws and social hierarchies, nighttime Rome is weirdly democratic. At night, the senators aren't watching. The censors are asleep, and everyone's just trying to forget how difficult the day was. But don't get too comfortable. As you round a corner, a shout pierces the air. A scuffle breaks out by a wine stall. 2 men arguing over a debt, or maybe a woman or possibly both. A third tries to break it up and ends up falling into a barrel. You back away quickly. Rome may sparkle, but it's never entirely safe after dark. Gangs of thieves prowl certain streets, and the city's fire brigades are often more focused on bribery than bucket chains. If a torch falls the wrong way tonight, someone's insula could go up in flames. You quicken your pace, sticking to the better-lit roads. You pass a baker pulling night shift, kneading dough by lamplight. Nearby, a water carrier delivers jugs to a wealthier domus. Even in the dead of night, the city never sleeps. It just shifts roles. You're startled by a sudden cheer, chariot fans. A group of drunken supporters of the green team are singing fight songs and waving olive branches like they've just won the Battle of Actium. One has painted his chest with what looks like mashed beets. They shout green forever as they stumble into a statue, apologize to it, and carry on. You decide not to mention the Blues have a better win record this season. A little later, you find yourself near the Field of Mars, where some wealthier youths are staging an impromptu foot race by torchlight. One trips on his own tunic and face plants into the dust. His friends erupt in laughter and carry him off to find more wine. Meanwhile, in a secluded garden nearby, a more somber affair unfolds, 2 cloaked figures whispering beneath a laurel tree, possibly lovers, possibly spies, possibly very bad actors in a secret tragedy rehearsal. And overhead, the stars. Rome's sky may be dusty with smoke and lamplight, but when you squint, you can still see Jupiter's glimmering eye. The constellations meant something to these people: Orion the hunter, Virgo the maiden, Gemini the twins. They told stories not just by candlelight but by starlight, mapping their myths across the heavens. A dog barks in the distance. A donkey brays. Somewhere, someone's playing a flute badly and being shushed by a neighbor with a broken amphora. Eventually, you drift toward the Tiber. The river reflects the moonlight in soft ripples, and a few fishermen sit silently, their lines dipped into the dark. One nods at you. He says nothing. Neither do you. Sometimes the only sacred thing left in Rome is silence. You sit on the bank, wrap your cloak tighter, and listen to the city breathing, grumbling, singing to itself in sleep. The sounds of late-night Rome are a strange lullaby. Part festival, part threat, part dream. You think about everything you've seen: drunken poets, risky dice games, secret trysts, impromptu races. And you realize that this too is Rome. Not the marble monuments or the Senate steps, but the little hours, the afterthoughts, the moments that slip through the cracks when no one's watching. Would you last in this version of the empire? Hard to say, but at least you know one thing. You'd never be bored. You awake with a start to the sound of heavy footfalls and muffled shouting, followed by the unmistakable clatter of armor. No, it's not a barbarian invasion, just a full military inspection. Welcome to Rome's answer to a surprise fire drill, the Castra check-in. You groan and roll off your straw-stuffed mattress. If you'd had dreams last night, they've been firmly marched over by sandal soles and disciplinary chants. You throw on your tunic, splash your face with cold water, and shuffle out the door, right into a wall of muscle and leather. A patrol from the cohorts urbani, the city's urban security force, strides past like a walking armory. Short swords at the ready, their eyes scanning for pickpockets, loiterers, or perhaps anyone wearing their belt slightly wrong. Rome doesn't mess around with public order. It assigns trained soldiers to keep the peace, basically, bouncers for the whole city. You step aside, hands up slightly, trying to look as law-abiding as possible. One of them sneers. Lost, citizen? Nope. Just overwhelmed. He grunts and moves on. You follow at a safe distance. The cohorts patrol the city day and night, especially around the forum, the baths, and tavern-filled alleyways where things tend to get stabby. They're not to be confused with the vigilas, Rome's answer to both firefighters and night watchmen. Think of them as half emergency responders, half nosy neighbors with torches. Historians still argue whether the vigilas were effective public servants or glorified bribery squads. Either way, they carry buckets, clubs, and attitude, and they'll fine you if your oil lamp isn't extinguished by curfew. You trail the patrol toward the Castra Praetoria, the massive barracks that houses the infamous Praetorian Guard. These aren't your average soldiers. They're elite, hand-picked, and terrifying even when eating grapes. Originally bodyguards for generals, the Praetorians now protect and sometimes intimidate emperors. You've heard rumors they've helped a few emperors retire early. You don't ask questions. You definitely don't make eye contact. The gates of the barracks loom ahead, flanked by stone eagles and surly guards. Through the open courtyard, you glimpse drills in progress, rows of men lunging in perfect sync, their sandals striking the ground with rhythmic menace. The sound alone makes you stand straighter. You edge closer to a public viewing platform where civilians occasionally watch the morning exercises, part entertainment, part reminder that Rome is very capable of handling rebellion. Thank you very much. The drillmaster barks commands. Shields up. Thrust. Retreat. Rotate. It's like an aggressive ballet with pointy bits. The younger recruits look eager to impress, their helmets too big and swords too shiny. The veterans? Calm, efficient, and slightly terrifying. One corrects a recruit's footwork with a swift smack of his gladius hilt. You whisper, tough crowd. A man next to you chuckles. This is the gentle version. Wait until they start the sparring rounds. Sure enough, two soldiers are called forward. They salute, draw their training weapons, still made of wood but heavy, and square off. Within seconds, one has the other pinned. No mercy, just muscle memory. You wince. Is that normal? The man shrugs. If it hurts here, it won't kill them later. Military life in Rome is brutal, regimented, and weirdly popular. Roman citizens often volunteer for the legions in hopes of steady pay, land bonuses, and a decent funeral if things go south. You, on the other hand, are beginning to value your unbruised limbs. Later, you stroll past a recruitment stand set up outside the barracks. A centurion with a scar running from ear to chin shouts the benefits: 3 meals a day, personal weapon maintenance, occasional glory. You consider signing up for about 3 seconds. Then you hear someone vomiting from the training latrines and move along. Near the outskirts of the city, you find a marching camp being set up by a visiting legion. These are the pop-up tents of the ancient world, precise, temporary, and surrounded by ditches deep enough to lose a small horse in. Every camp follows the same layout, a commander's tent at the center, flanked by officers with enlisted quarters along strict grid lines. Romans love order, especially when thousands of sweaty men with swords are involved. You peek inside one tent. A pair of soldiers clean their gear while singing a surprisingly catchy tune about cabbage soup and eternal warfare. Another sharpens his blade while humming the imperial anthem. A third, eyes closed, mutters a prayer to Mars. Even off duty, they don't relax much. You strike up a conversation with one grizzled veteran polishing a dented helmet. Ever think of quitting? You ask. He grins. Only every day. Why stay? Because outside the army, I'm nobody. In here? I'm a cog in the greatest machine on earth. Fair point. You thank him and back away before someone decides you look too civilian. As you return toward the city center, you stumble across a small parade, decorated standards, chanting citizens, and soldiers in ceremonial armor. It's a triumphal anniversary celebration for an old campaign. The crowd cheers, flowers are tossed, and a child on someone's shoulders yells, "Salve, heroes!" It's easy to forget, amid the dirt and danger, that Roman soldiers are idolized. They're seen as protectors of civilization, bearers of discipline, and, occasionally, walking propaganda. Sculptures of muscular warriors adorn public baths and town squares. A few are so unrealistic they make modern fitness influencers blush. You pause at one statue of a soldier dramatically stabbing a barbarian. The detail is incredible, down to the veins on the sword hand and the swoosh of the cape. It's art, myth, and PR all in one. As dusk falls, you pass a modest shrine to Mars, god of war. Offerings lie at the base: olive branches, broken spears, tiny bronze figurines. A tired soldier kneels before it, whispering thanks or perhaps apologies. And you realize, for all the glory and noise, Roman military life is as much burden as honor. You're not just marching into battle. You're carrying Rome on your back. You wake up to the shrill cry of a rooster, only it's not your rooster. You don't even have a rooster. But your neighbor does. And so does his neighbor. And by the time the seventh crow echoes off the stucco walls, it's official, it's market day. You pull on your sandals, already bracing for the chaos. Because if there's one place where Roman civilization shows its seams, it's the Forum, a whirlwind of commerce, gossip, posturing, lawsuits, pickpocketing, and at least one very aggressive cheese vendor. Your stomach rumbles, so you make your way to the nearest thermopolium, Rome's version of a fast food joint. Hot lentils simmer in clay pots. Flatbread crackles on a griddle. You order something resembling a pancake stuffed with herbs and olives and wash it down with watered wine that tastes faintly like clay and regret. Recharged, you head for the Forum Romanum. Even before you get there, the noise hits you. An avalanche of bargaining, preaching, shouting, and donkey braying. The Forum is the place to be seen, heard, and occasionally insulted by a philosopher in a stained toga. You pass a lawyer loudly rehearsing a speech to no one in particular. And thus I say thus, he bellows, pointing at a bakery. The baker raises an eyebrow and hands him a roll. Nearby, a trio of matrons argue over the price of garum, the fermented fish sauce that somehow made it into every Roman recipe, despite smelling like a gladiator's sock. The seller insists it's the finest from Hispania. One of the women retorts, "If this is Hispania, I'm Cleopatra." Historians still argue whether the garum trade propped up entire economies or simply tormented every nose from Gaul to Judea. Either way, it's flying off the stall today. You squeeze past a donkey hauling amphory of wine, guided by a boy no older than 10. Behind him, a merchant loudly hawks sponges, claiming they can double as either dish scrubbers or personal hygiene tools. You decide not to ask which ones are which. The heart of the Forum is part marketplace, part courthouse, part theater. Statues of dead emperors loom above the chaos, stone reminders that greatness might be immortal, but bird droppings are more persistent. Suddenly, a crier stands atop a wooden platform and claps twice. Everyone hushes just enough to hear him read the latest edictum, a public announcement about new taxes on goat herding and an update on local water rationing. You catch snippets about unsanctioned well tapping and fines for urination near aqueducts. You make a mental note to cross your legs near plumbing. But the Forum isn't just for news and noodles. It's also the epicenter of Rome's social ladder. You spot a senator gliding past, his laticlavia, the broad purple stripe on his toga catching the sunlight just right. He's flanked by 2 scribes and a nervous-looking slave balancing scrolls like a human filing cabinet. Then there's the equestrians, the rich but not quite elite crowd, wearing slightly shorter togas and slightly smugger expressions. One of them is arguing over land values with a real estate agent, while another is loudly reciting his family tree to anyone who didn't ask. You try to look casual, but someone mistakes you for a courier and hands you a package of dried figs with the instruction, "Give this to Marius the Tall." He knows what it means. You accept, mostly because saying no in the Forum can start a 3-hour legal dispute. At the edge of the square, a group of Stoic philosophers lecture about detachment from material goods while standing next to a jewelry stall. One of them pockets a ring when he thinks no one's looking. You blink. Did that actually happen? Hard to say. Nearby, a performance kicks off, 2 actors in clay masks reenacting a myth involving Jupiter, a goose, and some deeply questionable puns. A crowd gathers, laughs, throws coins. You can't help but chuckle as one actor trips over his tunic mid-curse and ends up nose first in a fruit crate. You edge toward the Basilica Julia where lawsuits are in full swing. The clatter of sandals and the clamor of oratory bounce off the columns like thunder. Inside, a young man is being accused of selling watered-down olive oil. He swears his press is honest. The judge looks unimpressed and snacks on almonds. In another corner, two merchants are locked in a screaming match over shipping delays from Alexandria. One pulls out a crumpled papyrus receipt, the other counters with a dramatic retelling of Poseidon's wrath. The court scribe sighs and starts sketching caricatures on his wax tablet. You don't stay long, something about the forum drains you. Maybe it's the constant threat of being drawn into a debate. Maybe it's the fact that no one seems to walk in straight lines. Maybe it's the goat that just tried to eat the hem of your tunic. Instead, you escape to a nearby colonnade where quieter vendors sell scrolls, charms, love potions, and authentic relics from Troy that look suspiciously like regular bricks. One seller insists his perfume is favored by Venus herself. You sniff it. It smells like basil and desperation. As the sun reaches its peak, the forum begins to shimmer with heat. White marble blazes underfoot. Citizens fan themselves with palm leaves. A few nap in shady doorways, one using a cabbage as a pillow. The tempo slows but never stops. You grab a cup of pasca, the soldier's sour vinegar drink, and sit on a step to take it all in. Around you, chaos, brilliance, pretense, authenticity, and endless human comedy. This is where Rome breathes, gossips, argues, and reinvents itself daily. And just as you're about to rise, a woman walks past with a pet monkey wearing a tunic. You blink again. Did that also just happen? Of course it did. It's market day in the Roman Forum. And you've survived it. Barely.